and I'm taking a little bit of unconventional view, whereby I'm telling that why we need to use Oracle HPCM. What is that does Oracle HPCM does, and how that component, how is that more of a demo, where I will take you to the screen of the real-time demo of BI Oracle HPCM, and will showcase you the capabilities the system has. So moving on, before I start anything, there is one Oracle HPCM on-prem version that was done by BISP only in February of 2015. You can take a look on this link, even if you search Oracle HPCM, probably the first or second link you will find that will be from BISP. Only difference between this version that we are discussing today and the version that is there online available on YouTube is that that is an on-prem version of HPCM. And based on the discussion as we go forward, I will highlight the differences, like what is the difference between Oracle Cloud HPCM and on-prem. But this discussion is altogether a new approach to that Oracle Cloud HPCM. And I'm not going to talk much about the discussion that we have already had in this video, which you can take a look. But then I am taking, as I said, unconventional way and approach that to let you know that what is that this version of HPCM is taking. And for this discussion, what I have thought about is that I will very fundamentally I will talk about that what is that HPCM first of all, and second component of is that why do we need it in an enterprise setting, and then the third and most important part is that how do we go about implementing it, and how we actually configure it, and how we actually do those settings when we have to analyze those HPCM metrics. So talking about what is the need of HPCM. So I don't know how many of you already have the background of Oracle space, but then Oracle HPCM, Oracle Hyperion HPCM is again sitting on top of that layer of Oracle space, which is the multi-dimensional database for Oracle Hyperion suite of applications. And what it does, as we said, that the first section is that we want to understand the profitability. And when I talk about profitability, it is a concept where in an enterprise setting, it gets very difficult to have a good view on the profitability. If you go back to the previous video by Amit Sharma on BISP itself, he has given a lot of those information, basic information, like how we calculate profitability and how revenue is different from profitability. But the essential idea he is trying to convey there also is the same, which is when we talk about profitability it can be by product or by BU or by whole department. There are a lot of components when we talk about profitability. There can be a revenue which is a higher number, but then when it comes to profitability, that is where we talk about those components, that what are those things that have been reduced out of that revenue amount, and then what is the net profitability. And in this discussion, my goal is to give you that overview of that how Oracle is positioning their products. So more than letting you know about that how do we configure, which we definitely will go about that, my goal is to give you an overview of those ideas, that how Oracle actually is selling those products into those business units and in the business segments, and how actually when you work on those product suites, how you should pitch your solutions, and how you should tell that when you are a professional in that working in that realm in enterprise setting, or reporting to your probably your BI director or someone who is heading that department, then how you should be presenting your the forms you design, the reports you design, and the kind of terms that you should use. So idea is to make sure that you are a holistic professional when you are dealing with these Hyperion suite of applications. Another point of view, the way I take a look at it is more of a business function, which means in terms of basic architecture, it is again the same as base. However, in terms of delivering value, that is where the Hyperion suite of products, or if you talk about any other product, be it SAP or IBM, they have their own products that are talking the specific language to the specific user sets. So specifically in finance, if you talk about profitability, and if you are having this Oracle Hyperion implementation, then my goal is to make sure that you are very conversant with those terminologies, and then doing the configuration and doing the setup is something that we all have to understand. At the same time, the idea is to make sure that you functionally understand that when we say understanding profitability, what it entails. And that is where my aim in this session is to make you aware that what are those things that we should go about typically when we undertake an HPCM project or HPCM assignment. Another important thing when we very fundamentally, again going back to square one, that why do we need profitability, or why do we need profitability analysis at all at first place? And the key to understand is that typically what happens in an enterprise setting, we have a lot of those costs that go into making a product or a service. And what do we do with those things? That typically we want to have a clear view of first of all, how were those profits were generated, like what were those key drivers. Second part of that is primarily we want to understand that when we talk about our operational costs or our operational dimensions, be it in terms of HR, IT, finance, how do we align those costs? And when I say align, it more specifically talks about those concepts where how do we allocate those costs? How do we tell that, okay, HR of my company was allocated 10% to the overall profitability of development of a certain product? Similarly, there are analysis which we want to see in terms of our customers or products, and where we want to see how much is their contribution towards revenue or towards profitability. And then at the same time, we want to also understand that there are a lot of horizontal resources typically in the company that we want to understand that how they have contributed to the profit making propositions in the company, or in the loss making propositions in the company. So those are all the analysis typically when we talk about Oracle, or typically even in general in a EPM sphere. Then we want to understand that in terms of performance, how those things have been ranked as specific to any product or any department or whole organization. And that is the whole reason that why HPCM is the component that if we have that implemented, then it gives us more clarity in terms of these metrics that we have talked about. And another thing is that when we talk about just imagine there is a product and that specific to that product, if you want to factor all of the components that went into making that product, it can be product by itself, it could be a lot of those services, it could be vertical services, it could be horizontal services, it could be multiple other line of businesses, LOBs that have contributed to making that product. And then how we factor all of those components so that we have a complete or a comprehensive idea that what is that profitability component for that product. Now in terms of revenue, probably a product made us revenue of, just imagine, $100. But then if we talk about in terms of profitability, it can be a profit of $50, it can be a profit of 20 or even 10. Now it depends on that how well we have captured all of the costs that have gone into making that revenue of 100. And that is where the whole idea of HPCM is having in place. It might seem simplistic, but in a global setting, imagine if there is a company which is spanning across 20 geographies, and then I don't know, multiple team structures, and then a lot of those departments working on a project. It gets complicated day by day just to make sure and keep track of all those things. And we will, there is a section in this end of this PPT that talks about why it is difficult in capturing those things. We'll go about that also, that why it is so difficult. Like, it should not be difficult, right? It's an enterprise setting, we have all those things in line. Then again, why do we have to have this whole new component altogether, which is called HPCM? Another component of, another use case of, another benefit of having HPCM is that once we have those things in place, we have the capabilities of analyzing multi-dimensional database analysis, and then we have a lot of those customized business rules that are based on users and their use cases, and then we can run multiple analysis on them. So we capture it once, but then we can slice and dice as we do typical S-based applications. We can do a lot of those analysis. Another thing is that we can run time series analysis, we can do a lot of interactive reporting, we can do reconciliations where we want to see if there's an allocation that has gone, then where it has allocated and what is the extent that has been allocated to. And then the idea of HPCM is not just to give its own insights, but also to integrate all the legacy applications that we have in place, including ERP, CRM, and then typical other applications that we have, or in-house applications also. So the whole idea is that whatever the cost drivers that we have defined in those applications, that talks very well to the metrics that we have created. And then that is where those additional value of having HPCM comes into picture when we have implemented it. And moving on to the same thing, once we have these models set up already, that gives us automated capabilities of running those simulations time and again, running those models time and again, running those allocations time and again. We'll go about those certain terminologies that go into the sphere of HPCM. Allocations is one of them. We'll talk about that. Similarly, we have a lot of those action items that we gather in terms of, if there is a profitability analysis, that we know that if there is only 10% of the profitability of in making a certain product or service, providing a certain service, we aim to have a clear idea that what is that, what are those reasons that why only 10% of total amount of revenue contributes to that profit. So we should have those action items, and then how we can down the line we can correct those reasons or those factors. And then similarly we have those access to those advanced analytics, where we can find if we want to change certain parameters in terms of pricing, in terms of cost, in terms of allocations, then how it is going to impact our total profits. Overall goal of this is that we want to make sure that our costs are aligned with the revenues that we are making, and also we have a clear visibility in terms of our profitability. So basically, again, with this webinar, my goal is to make sure that we understand of all of those factors, and most of them, it is the functional factors that we are encountering right now. But the idea is to make sure that we do understand that when a business thinks of having a HPCM module in place, then what are those considerations that it takes into account. And then if we talk about those considerations, that is where we align closely with the business and we are more successful in those endeavors that business have. Now, so far what we have discussed is about the conceptual framework. I want to take you to an example of of the HPCM or profitability in general, typically how it looks like. Now, this slide that talks about activities, and then imagine there are a lot of products where we have column 1, which is 2,500 units, and 5,000 units, 700, 5,000 similarly, and then it has lot of those categories of then it has revenue, and then it has divided further, and at the end that is where we see the total profitability. Now, in a nutshell, that is what we are trying to achieve. It is a very simplistic model that we see right now in our screen. But then imagine if there is a scenario, again, as I said, if of a business which is spanning across 30 countries, or having 5 time zones, and then working across probably 50,000 employees. That is where the real complexity of business comes into picture, and that is where HPCM and solution like these help us to streamline these key indicators, where we understand profitability, cost, and then we align those drivers that how we can further enhance our key performance indicators. So in our case right now, as we are studying this HPCM, profit is the one where we are focusing on, and that is where we see that if we go about making 10,000 units, then our profitability is maximized, and that is where we should be targeting at. But again, as I said, this is just a simplistic example just to understand the gist of that what we are going to achieve, and the whole idea of HPCM around is the same. Now, as we see in this screen, there are only 4, 5, 6 categories, but then in real time example we have much more than that. So what it does eventually is that it gives us not only just that analysis for profitability, but also it gives us those certain reporting across profit and loss. That is one of the features that these are the additional benefits that we have if we have these solutions. And then at the same time we have a very good breakup between our product offerings and our service offerings, and we have a clear idea that what is our cost structure. And once we have our cost structure, it gives us our multiple key indicators where we know that okay, how much is that quality assurance cost us, how much is the support horizontal cost us, how much is that delivery cost us. And then overall, if we know these things, then we know that what is the best way to control those things, and what is the best way to manage those things, and is there any way we can go about studying an industry-wide study, and what is the best way to make sure that we have a clear benchmarking against that, or if we have a certain threshold that we want to set up. So those are the things that we have in our so far we have discussed that what is that HPCM solution, what it entails, what it is, why it is needed, and then we are going about the how section. So let me take you to this how section, whereby I will talk about that Hyperion HPCM cloud solution. It will take a moment for me to go there. Yeah, right now let me hide this on the screen. Okay, so this is the home screen of Hyperion HPCM. Oops. This is the home screen, and this is where On-prem HPCM looks a lot different in terms of how and this is the Hyperion Profitability and Cost Management in Cloud version that we have. And this is the icon based and app based view that Oracle has given for all of its cloud application, be it HPCM or be it PBCS or EPBCS. I'm sure most of you must be aware about these layouts, but then we can configure these layouts based on what we want. For example, if we want a different icon in here, we can do those things. We can certainly change their positioning, but then by and large, this is the layout for Oracle Cloud applications, specifically in EPM space. One of the key areas that we have to understand, I will navigate you through, is one of this area. If you click on this one, it's a navigator, and then this navigator is defined across multiple sections. So one of the section is application, another section is tools, then you have academy, where you have a lot of tutorials according to the product that you have selected, and then it is administer section, where you have administrating, and you have a lot of those. Only if you are administrator, then only you can see these things. And then manage, where you manage a lot of those calculations, rules, models, and we'll talk about these things in details too. This is the section about installation, which means across Hyperion products, you must be aware about certain client tools that that are installed in your local machines. One of them, very famous one, is Smart View, and then there are a few more others, which is HPCM Automate for Hyperion Cloud. It's a command line utility whereby you can schedule your task, you can schedule your multiple jobs, and it's a scripting. It's just a command line window, and you can do your scripting and you can write those scripts. And then for reporting, eventually we have Reporting Studio, whereby we can create our blank reports, and then explore repository, where we can explore reports repository. Oracle Cloud Marketplace is the place where you have a lot of those plugins and a lot of those other features that is provided by Oracle Cloud Services. Now going back to our home screen, that is where you have this is your name. Once you log in, I have currently logged in. That is where I see my, this is the dummy name that we have currently. And then you can set up your preferences, basically, which is your time zone, your names, and then downloads is again your client tool downloads, and typically these are the options that you have been provided. On clicking on it, I see these options. That is typically my my profile. I can change this picture, I can do this time zone setting. All of those things have been defined across my my profile, and then and every user is allocated to certain dimensions, and then based on your user role, you have been allocated to certain dimensions, and that is where I can see my dimensions right now. Now going about this dashboards, if you click on the dashboard, you will see a snapshot of, and this is the customizable dashboard, whereby you can see multiple reports based on your choice. If you want to change certain reports, if you don't want to see them, that is where it gives you that flexibility of creating your own dashboards. But however, imagine if we have a cost analysis of certain product, for example bike in our case, then as we discussed in our previous slide, that HPCM at a very high level is talking about the breakup of the cost, or where my out of, if I earn $100 of revenue, how my $10 of profit, like where is that $90 have gone? That is where the visibility of that that whole product life cycle is going to visualize in this solution. And that is where you see, if, for example, in this current example of trends section, if you see, I see that my business support cost have been around 3,800K. And if you move on to the production cost, then this is again 600K. And then at the end of that section, we see that there is a cost of customer service around 2,500K. Now this is one bigger umbrella, but then if you break down into certain components, what goes into making by, when we go about, you know, that more granular level, that is where we see that what is that cost breakup. That is where, and then this is one of the report that we have as an example. Similarly, there are multiple other things now we have in terms of overall financial performance. If you want to take a look, then that is where it is, this report will tell us that how all of our costs, how in what time of across the time, what is that in terms of profits, how they have performed. And then there are multiple models of bikes. That is where it has highlighted here, Qmart, Sporting World, like this, and then how they have performed over the period of years. Now all these things that we see in these dashboards are all customizable. Basically that is our task, like as a developer, as an analyst, we should be able to articulate these requirements from business, that what is that they should be looking at, so that that gives them a comprehensive view for their business. And that is where we design all these things. These are all customizable. And in our trainings, that is where we'll talk about those things, like how to design those KPIs, how to design these reports. These are all sample reports right now, but these are the real-time reports when we design based on the real-time KPIs, based on the real-time metrics, based on the real-time dimensions. Now, just as an example, we can take a look on the how the costs have been distributed across, when we talk about multiple components of getting the material, building that, and when we're finishing that, when we do the testing of those, and out of the testing, if there's a rework, that is where it talks about those things. And then we have talked about these models, and we can have a very good view of in which model of the bike, where is the time where we have taken the multiple building cost. For example, building cost is the highest in limited edition beach cruiser, for example. Now it gives us very good pointer that okay, if there is a highest cost, then we can understand that what is that makes it more costly in terms of building that bike. Now there can be multiple factors which can be justifiable. Probably, if there is a limited edition beach bike, then probably it has some additional features which makes it more costly. However, there can be scenario where probably it is not any different much in terms of technology. However, still costs are still high. That is where we have those actionable insights to know and to understand how we control these costs, and eventually how we know that how the profitability will increase eventually. Similarly, we have these things, in terms of trends, we see that typically building takes more, more cost, and then we have, finishing takes lesser cost, and then like these things. But these breakups we get only when we have collected all that data, and when we have these kind of software solutions that are in place. I will close this window and we'll go to the tab called intelligence. Let us see what we have here. So this is the tab. Most likely it is the kind of insights where we talk about just imagine again, we can this is all customizable, and we can create these sections, these reports, these insights based on the things that that we feel. If there's a certain analysis we feel, it's basically kind of a reporting. And then imagine that if you want to see that for these are the customers that are buying our bikes, and then out of that we want to see that what is the gross profit percentage. That is where we see. Now right now this is the template, we see that all of these 100%. However, there will be a scenario where we see that certain customers are having a lesser profit margin as compared to other ones, and then that gives us an actionable insight that why it has been the case. Now similarly, if I move on to the section called reports, that is where we have the ability of seeing existing reports, as well as we can create our own new reports. If you want to create our new reports, that is where we go to create a new report. Now, if you want to take an existing report and you want to take a look, for example, income statement of last 6 months, let us see how it looks like. We'll click on that, and these are the reports that are ready for us to view. And it gives us that whole view. And then these are the same reports we can create. We can use these reports and we can see that how the formulas have been calculated, all those things. But then this is the section where it gives us about all those reports and all. Talking about HPCM, one of the core component of that is that rule balancing. So what it does, rule balancing is basically this is the template right now as we see, but then that is where you see, rule balancing is nothing but what it is telling you, if there is a cost that has been associated with the product, and if it is genuine cost, what we are doing essentially is that we are telling that, okay, that was the cost that we have paid. However, by the time, so there is a two component of it, allocation in and allocation out. So if there is an allocation in and allocation out, and if there is a difference, then where is the difference that we can attribute it to? So similarly, if we talk about this example right now, we see that there is a balance of 1000, very first row. This is the difference. And that difference, when we see, right now it is that at a very high level, but let us go to the child level. That is where we see that task utility and expense adjustment. That is where we see a balance of minus 440. So every time we are balancing that, every cost that we have paid and we have incurred a revenue out of that, that is where it is, telling us that, okay, this is where you have costed extra. And that is where we have this whole analysis of balancing, and it tells us that where is that extra cost. We typically call these things in functional terms as leakage. So if there is a leakage, then this is basically, it is telling us that if there is not balancing, then where it is getting leaked. So we'll go to the multiple other sections, typically in this section where we have manage, and we have all these sections where it tells us to how to model our existing cost and profitability. Now what happens, one of the important things that I wanted to discuss in this session is to understand why it is so difficult to have a view on profitability so much. Why it is so difficult? So it is difficult because, let me, I don't think you can see my screen because I changed it. Let me see if I can show you. Okay, I share my screen. Okay, hopefully you see my, okay, no, I switched back to my PowerPoint, and that is where I want to showcase this slide to you. Now the challenge with this, why it is so difficult to have this, HPCM or any kind of profitability analysis, why it is so complex, or why do we need a different solution altogether? The reason for that is that typically what happens, when we capture a cost, when we capture an expense, we have a legacy system in place, or typically we have an ERP system, or we might have a costing system, or we might have a financial system, we might have a CRM system where we capturing customers. But idea is that, when we talk about profitability, is a different concept altogether. Why? Because there are a lot of those costs that we do not capture in ERP. Similarly, there are a lot of costs that we might not capture in a financial system, or there will be a lot of those features in, imagine an organized kind of a arrangement. So what happens, ideally we have a organized cost structure where we know that, okay, this is the HR cost, this is the finance cost, but then there are a lot of horizontal costs that do not account for it. For example, IT costs, or for example, there is a lot of facilities cost that are spread horizontally. We do not account for these things in when we talk about profitability in these systems. So the idea of HPCM is to ensure that we account for these things, and we know that these are the costs that we talk about, and these are the reasons that why my costs have been more as compared to the revenue, and that is the reason that we talk about. So what it does, when we talk about these things, going back to my original screen, if I talk about these thing calculations, that is where I define all these things, and we'll go about these things more in detail. But we talk about these things that, okay, this is where we define all these calculations. Now similarly, we have a lot of those things called rules. We'll talk about rules also, where we administer these rules. And then there are two things called rules and rule sets. Rule sets is specifically grouping of all the kind of similar rules. That is where we see this is the rule set, this is where these are the rules. For example, if we have occupancy expense allocations, that's a rule set. Within that rule set, we might have, right now we have, these many rules within that. And if you want to drill into certain rule, we can click on that one, and then that will give us that view of those, what is that formula of that rule. This is where we click on that, and that is a part of the training that we will undergo more in detail, like when we, and these are the syntax where we can just simply import those dimensions. We can put our expressions, we can write those things, and that is where we define that what is the target, where we are defining those things. But that's a part of that detailed discussion that we will have down the line. But the idea of HPCM is to make sure that we define clearly, like what are those things that when we say there are certain rules and there are certain cost drivers, then what are those cost drivers? Like when we define those things, what are those things that actually define that, okay, these are the costs that makes it more costly, a certain product. I have a slide that I wanted to show you. I don't think I have it right now, but one of the key component in those activities is that activity based costing, which is ABC. That is another thing that we want to talk about more in manufacturing setting. So what happens is that every activity is associated with the cost. So those are the tangible activities we can say. We saw in an example like finishing, we saw in our example testing, building. Those are all the activities. Now every activity has a certain cost associated to it. Now again, in building a product, there are a lot of those things also which are not directly associated in terms of activities, but then still those costs are there, as I said, in terms of facilities, support, or IT, finance. Like those are the horizontal components that we have to imbibe when we are trying to calculate the profitability component of an application. So these are the aspects that we want to discuss in terms of when we go about these applications. And then any questions you might have, I will open it up for